Our dream house was everything we'd saved for until the previous owner called with one chilling instruction: never, ever touch the armoire in the master bedroom. The house was our everything. Mark and I had sunk every last penny we had, and a few we didn't, into the down payment for this beautiful 2-story Victorian. It was the kind of place you see in movies, with a wraparound porch, a crooked weather vane, and windows that seemed to hold a century of secrets. We'd spent years saving, living in a cramped apartment that always smelled vaguely of our neighbor's cooking. This house wasn't just wood and plaster. It was the physical manifestation of our future. The former owner, a woman named Eleanor Vance, was quiet and reserved during the sale. She seemed sad to be leaving, her eyes lingering on the crown molding and the stained glass window above the main staircase. She told us she'd lived there for 40 years, ever since she was a newlywed. "The house has good bones," she'd said, her voice a papery whisper. "Just take care of her." We promised we would. The first week was pure bliss. We were living on takeout pizza and sleeping on a mattress on the floor of the master bedroom, but we'd never been happier. We'd fall asleep holding hands, whispering about which color to paint the living room and where we'd put the Christmas tree. Mark was completely enchanted. He'd walk from room to room, running his hand along the walls, talking about the house's energy and its soul. I was more practical, focused on the peeling paint in the bathroom and the draft coming from the attic, but his joy was infectious. It was in the second week that I started noticing things, small things, the kind of quirks you expect in an old house. A cold spot in the upstairs hallway that never seemed to warm up, no matter how high we cranked the heat. The faint, almost imperceptible scent of lavender that would waft through the kitchen at odd hours, even though we had no air fresheners. Mark would just laugh it off. "It's the house settling, honey," he'd say. "It's an old lady, she creaks and groans. And the lavender? That was probably Eleanor's signature scent. It's just lingering in the wood." He had an answer for everything. The door to the cellar that I was sure I had locked, only to find it slightly ajar the next morning. "The frame is probably warped," he said, wiggling the knob to prove his point. The soft, rhythmic tapping sound I heard coming from inside the walls of the pantry one night. "Mice, babe. We'll have to get some traps." He was so blissfully happy, so wrapped up in his dream, that I didn't have the heart to argue. I started to think maybe he was right. Maybe I was just stressed, my mind playing tricks on me in a new, unfamiliar space. Then came the incident with the rug. We were finally starting to unpack our belongings, and I decided to tackle the study. It was a small, cozy room with a beautiful but ancient floral rug in the center. It was dusty and smelled of mothballs, so I decided to roll it up to give the floorboards a good cleaning. As I pulled the heavy fabric back, I saw them. Scratches. Deep, frantic scratches etched into the dark wood of the floor, all clustered in one spot, hidden perfectly by the rug. They weren't from furniture being dragged. The marks were too chaotic, overlapping and jagged, like an animal had been trapped and was trying desperately to claw its way out. But they were too uniform, too deliberate for an animal. My blood ran cold. I stood there, staring at the scarred wood, the scent of lavender suddenly thick in the air. That night, Mark was out picking up a celebratory dinner. We'd finally gotten our couch delivered. I was alone, the house creaking around me in the twilight. My phone, sitting on the dusty mantelpiece, buzzed. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice sounding small in the cavernous living room. Silence. Then a shaky, breathless voice I barely recognized. Is this Clara?" "Yes, who is this?" It's Eleanor, Eleanor Vance." Her voice was nothing like the calm, wistful woman who had sold us the house. This was the voice of pure panic. It was tight, strained, like she was forcing the words out. "Eleanor, is everything okay?" I asked, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. I glanced instinctively towards the study, towards the floorboards hidden beneath that old floral rug. "Listen to me," she hissed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You need to come to my new place. Now." "What? Now? What's going on?" "I can't explain over the phone. Just come. My address is in the closing paperwork, and Clara—" She paused, and I could hear her take a ragged breath. "Don't tell your husband." Before I could ask why, before I could even process the chilling instruction, the line went dead. I stood there, phone in my hand, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. The silence of the house pressed in on me, and then I heard it, a soft, scraping sound from the room directly above me, our bedroom. It sounded like fingernails being dragged slowly, deliberately across a wooden floor. My feet were rooted to the floorboards. The scraping stopped as suddenly as it had begun, plunging the house back into an unnerving silence that felt louder than the noise itself. It was the kind of quiet that listens back. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else. A creak, a footstep, the settling of old wood. Nothing. Just the frantic thumping of my own heart. Headlights cut across the living room windows, sweeping over the bare walls. Mark was home. The sound of his key in the lock was a gunshot in the silence. I forced my muscles to unlock, turning to face the door with a smile I hoped didn't look as brittle as it felt. He burst in, juggling 2 large bags of Chinese food and a bottle of wine, a huge, goofy grin on his face. "I am a hunter-gatherer, and I have brought back a feast for my queen," he announced, his voice echoing in the unfurnished space. He kicked the door shut and beamed at me. Isn't this amazing? Our first real meal at a real table in our real house. He hadn't noticed my pallor, my wide eyes. He was too caught up in the dream, and in that moment, I saw with perfect clarity why Eleanor had told me not to tell him. He wouldn't believe me. He would tell me it was the pipes, or a branch against the window, or my overactive imagination. He would soothe me and placate me and wrap me up in his optimism, and whatever was real and terrifying in this house would get buried under his rationalizations. I would be alone with this fear, but he would make me feel crazy for it. I had to know what Eleanor knew. I had to know if I was losing my mind. "It's perfect," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. I took one of the bags from him. "Oh, shoot. You know what I completely forgot?" "What's that, babe?" he asked, already heading for the kitchen to find plates. I followed him, my mind racing, constructing the lie. "Cream cheese. I was going to make that cheesecake you love tomorrow to celebrate, and I totally blanked at the store." He laughed, pulling out the plates we'd unpacked that morning. "Don't worry about it. We can get some tomorrow." "No, I really want to," I insisted, my voice tight with false enthusiasm. "The store's only 10 minutes away. I'll just run out and grab some now while you unpack the food. I'll be back before you've even found the forks." He turned and gave me a kiss. "You're the best, but hurry back. The Kung Pao chicken is calling my name." "I will," I promised, grabbing my keys from the hook by the door. I didn't even take my coat. I just needed to get out. As I pulled the heavy front door closed behind me, I glanced up at the window of our bedroom. It was dark and empty, a black square against the twilight sky. It looked perfectly normal, and that was somehow the most terrifying thing of all. The drive was a blur. I punched Eleanor's address into my phone's GPS, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold it steady. It led me to a sterile, modern apartment complex on the other side of town, the absolute antithesis of our grand, historic house. It was a place with no memory, no soul, a place you go when you're running away from something. I found her apartment, number 3B, and knocked. The door opened a crack, held by a chain lock. A sliver of Eleanor's face appeared. She looked 10 years older than she had a month ago. Her eyes were sunken and bloodshot, her skin pale and waxy. "You came," she breathed, her relief palpable. She fumbled with the chain and opened the door, pulling me inside and immediately locking it behind me. The apartment was sparsely furnished with brand new generic items. It smelled of fresh paint and new carpet. "Eleanor, what is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "You terrified me." "He doesn't know you're here?" she asked, grabbing my arms, her grip surprisingly strong. "No, Mark thinks I went to the grocery store." "Good, good," she muttered, pacing back and forth in the small living room. She stopped and turned to me, her eyes boring into mine. "You need to listen to me very carefully, Clara. I never should have sold it. I thought maybe with new people, it would be different. I was a fool." "Sold what? The house?" "Eleanor, what are you talking about?" She ignored my question and walked over to a cardboard box sitting in the corner, rummaging through it until she pulled out an old, faded photograph in a tarnished silver frame. She thrust it into my hands. "The master bedroom," she said. "That's how it looked when my husband and I lived there." I looked down at the photo. It was our room, but filled with her life. Her bed, her vanity, and against the far wall stood a colossal dark wood armoire, intricately carved with leaves and vines. I recognized it immediately. We hadn't been able to move it, it was too heavy. Mark had joked it was probably built inside the room. It was still standing in that exact spot right now upstairs. "Okay," I said, looking up at her, confused. "It's still there." A wave of relief washed over Eleanor's face. "You haven't moved it yet? You haven't tried to empty it?" "No," I said slowly. "We were going to this weekend. It's full of old sheets and blankets." Eleanor grabbed the photo from my hand and pointed a trembling finger at the armoire. "You can't. You can never move it. You can never, ever empty it. Are you listening to me?" Her eyes were wild. "Promise me, Clara. Promise me you won't touch the back panel." A cold dread, sharp and specific, pierced through my confusion. "The back panel? Eleanor, what's behind the back panel of an armoire?" Her face crumpled. It was a mask of grief and terror that she had clearly worn for decades. "It's not what's behind it," she whispered, tears welling in her haunted eyes. "It's what's in it, or who." The story tumbled out of her, a torrent of confession held back for 40 years. Her husband, Arthur, wasn't the kind, gentle man everyone thought he was. Behind the closed doors of that beautiful house, he was a monster. His temper was a coiled snake, striking without warning. He'd controlled every aspect of her life, from the money she spent to the people she saw. Leaving was not an option. He had made that brutally clear. The house was his kingdom, and she was its prisoner. One night, his rage had escalated beyond anything she'd ever experienced. He'd come at her, his face purple with fury, his hands reaching for her throat. In a blind panic, she'd grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. She hadn't meant to kill him. She had just wanted him to stop. But he didn't. When it was over, there was silence. The silence she had prayed for every night. She was finally free, but now she was a murderer. "I couldn't call the police," she choked out, twisting her hands together. He was a respected man. They would have called me a hysterical liar. I was trapped. So in the dead of that night, she did the only thing she could think of. The armoire, a wedding gift from Arthur's family, was her husband's prized possession. Using all her strength, she had managed to pry off the thin, decorative back panel. The space behind it was hollow, a dark void between the wardrobe and the wall. It was just big enough. She buried him there, in his favorite piece of furniture, and nailed the panel shut. For 40 years, Arthur had stood silent, sentinel in their bedroom. The cold spots, the scent of lavender, his mother's favorite, the scratches on the floor beneath the study rug where she had paced and nearly lost her mind in the days after. It was all him. "He's still there, Clara," she sobbed. His energy, his anger. It's bound to that house, to that room. He knows you're there now. He hates it. He hated anyone but him having what was his. The scraping sound, fingernails on wood. It wasn't mice. It was the sound of someone trying to get out. My blood turned to ice. I drove home in a daze, Eleanor's frantic words echoing in my ears. When I walked in, Mark was on the couch, watching TV. He'd saved me a plate. "Hey, you were gone a while," he said, smiling. "Find your cream cheese?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my mind a vortex of horror. I had to get him out of there. I had to get us both out. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside Mark, listening to the house breathe around us, my eyes fixed on the monolithic shadow of the armoire in the corner. Every creak of the floorboards was him. Every gust of wind rattling the windows was his whisper. I felt a malevolent presence pressing in on us, a simmering rage that had been dormant for decades and was now slowly waking up. The next morning, I told Mark I wasn't feeling well. My face was so pale, my hands still so shaky, that he believed me instantly. I told him I thought I'd seen a rat in the bedroom and it had freaked me out. "I can't stay here," I said, my voice cracking with genuine fear. "Not until we get an exterminator. Can we please just go to a hotel for a night or two?" Mark, ever the loving husband, agreed immediately. He was disappointed but more concerned for my well-being. "Of course, babe. Whatever you need." We packed a bag. As I threw clothes into a duffel, my eyes kept darting to the armoire. I could almost feel a gaze on my back, cold and possessive. As Mark carried our bags downstairs, I hesitated at the bedroom door. I took a deep breath, walked back to the armoire, and gently laid my hand on the cool, dark wood. "It's not your house anymore," I whispered into the silence. "She's free, and now so are we." We never went back. The next day, I called a realtor, a different one this time. I told her we had a family emergency and had to move back across the country immediately. We had to sell, and we had to sell fast. We put it on the market for a ridiculously low price, accepting the first cash offer that came in, taking a devastating financial loss. Mark was heartbroken and confused, but he trusted me. He saw the genuine terror in my eyes and knew that whatever had happened, it was real to me. And that was enough for him. I never told him the truth. How could I? I let him believe I had just been overwhelmed by the old house, that my nerves had gotten the better of me. It was a kinder truth. Sometimes, late at night in our new, boringly modern and wonderfully silent apartment, I think about the house. I think about the new family moving in, full of hope and dreams, just like we were. I think about them deciding to renovate the master bedroom, wanting to get rid of that big, old-fashioned armoire in the corner. And I pray, for their sake, that they decide it's too heavy to move and just leave it be.